I feel like my wig is lifting. Is it lifting? It's a good time to show off my Cusco hat. Love this hat. It's relevant. Today's video is a long-winded way of answering the question, should you travel to Peru in 2023? The short answer, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Como va? Alianchu. Welcome, beautiful people. I'm Jojo. I study international development, media, and social change. As someone who loves to travel, I think it's very important for travelers to understand the political and social climates of the places that we visit so that we don't be out here looking stupid and so that we can act accordingly. My hope is that someone thinking of traveling to Peru in 2023 or even years to come will have a better understanding of the country, or at least be intrigued enough to learn a bit more. So let's talk about the ousting of Peruvian President Pedro Castillo and the many lives that have been lost in the aftermath. So I always want to preface these conversations by addressing my own biases and perspectives. I don't know if y'all knew this. I'm a black woman. So obviously, truly this is none of my business. But I just want to understand. And that's why I travel. That's why I studied international development, to gain a better understanding of the world around me and the people that I meet. I had a chance to go to Peru with a friend who lived in Lima. So we're in Peru. We're in Cusco to be exact. And all over we're seeing these flags. They're like kind of rainbow colored. And I brought these flags up. I was like, oh, they're so pretty. So the other American in our travel group was like, oh, yeah, I've been seeing those rainbow flags. Ooh, they support gay people. But I knew that wasn't it. In my research about Peru leading up to our trip, I had come across these flags. I'd even come across them in certain immigration protests. And I knew that they represented, indigenous heritage, but I truly didn't understand what they were for. So my friend who lives in Peru explained it's called the Wifala. I hope I'm saying that right. Drag me in the comments if you need to. It's okay. My heart can take it. And it represents the indigenous peoples of the Andes Mountains. That's in Peru, Bolivia, Chile, etc. And in that moment, I was like, oh, that's so cool. I'm really happy just to see that people are proud of their indigenous heritage. And my friend who lives in Peru was like, yes, people have pride in their heritage, but there's a lot of discrimination as well. She said, if you look at the top positions in the government, the CEOs and the executives of organizations and companies, it's very rare that you would see an indigenous person in that leadership position. Ever since she said that, I'm like, damn. I see it. I see it and I can't unsee it. While traveling throughout Peru and even keeping up with Peruvian politics, I've gained so much respect, love, and admiration for the indigenous peoples of the Andes. My family is from Guyana, and I'm born and raised in the US. I recognize my privilege to be able to study and research these kinds of topics while other people are living in the struggle. I want to find ways to show love, respect, and solidarity with indigenous communities all across America. I feel like it's important to kind of raise awareness about the human rights abuses while also just showing love to the Peruvians, because I got mad love for y'all. Peru is a country in South America. So let's start. They have such a rich history of culture. It is historically the center of the Inca Empire, and the food in Peru, Peru has the best ceviche, hands down. Period. The country is twice the size of Texas, with 32 million people, and most of those people are either Catholic or some form of Christian. By race, 60% of the people are mestizo, which in this context means white and indigenous ancestry. 26% are indigenous or Amerindian. 6% are white. 4% are black. Hey. and 0.2% are Nikkei or Tucson. Drag me in the comments if you need to. I don't. Basically, that means that they immigrated to Peru from Japan or China. In terms of the economy, mining is huge in Peru. They are one of the largest exports of copper, silver, zinc, gold. Agriculture is also one of the top industries. Over 40% of the population lives below the poverty line, and there's a drastic difference between the people who live on the coast and the people who live in the rural mountainous communities. 80% of Peruvians speak Spanish, 16% speak Quechua, 2% speak Aymara, and there are a few other indigenous languages, including Arawak. In terms of politics, Peru has had 7 presidents in the last 7 years. The longest president was dictator Alberto Fujimori. I did a lot of research on him. He's pretty right-wing. He ruled for 10 years. Some of the sites that I came across kind of credited him with freeing Peruvians from the horrors of socialism, which I found to be quite interesting considering that many people qualify him as a dictator. But basically what that means is that he sold off a lot of the nationalized industries to private investors, and many of the Fujimori politics are still in place in Peru today. I like to follow a lot of different international news, including Democracy Now!, Deutsche Welle, Al Jazeera, and so I was following what is happening in Peru from afar, from my American media, Western lens. I listened to a lot of interviews by Peruvian sociologist Eduardo González Cueva, which I really appreciated his take. So here's the timeline from my stupid American perspective. June 2021, Pedro Castillo is ahead of Kiki Fujimori, and the Peruvian and international media is kind of surprised. Kiki really thought she had it in the bag. But by July, Pedro Castillo had won just over 50% of the vote. Throughout the year, Castillo makes a lot of promises, but he's not able to get any of those policies passed through Congress. By the fall of 2022, there are allegations of corruption against Castillo. Congress tries to impeach Castillo, then Castillo tries to disband Congress and the judicial body of government. By December 7th, 2022, Castillo is impeached and he's jailed for corruption charges. The former vice president, Dina Boluarte, now becomes president of Peru. At this time, the presidents of Mexico, Bolivia, Argentina, Colombia issue a letter denouncing the ousting of Castillo. That was pretty significant to me. Then out of nowhere, America's like, we recognize Dina Boluarte as president. We'll get to that. We will get to that. From the start of 2023, protests have risen to Uliaca, Cusco, and even in the capital of Lima. The demands from protesters went from reinstating President Castillo to calling for the new president, Dina Boluarte, to resign, calling for all of Congress to resign, calling for a new constitution altogether. The latest demand is a call to move the 2024 elections into 2023. This was pretty alarming for me because, as I said, I got mad love for Peru. I even wanted to revisit Peru in January of this year. Obviously, I decided not to go. The streets were hot, Machu Picchu was closed down, and there were even reports of tourists being harassed by protesters. Since then, Machu Picchu has opened up, but who knows what the future holds. Outside of traveling to Peru, I was pretty concerned with just the number of people killed by police and military forces. The majority of these people were from indigenous communities, and many of the people killed were teenagers and young people. So as of February of 2023, over 69 people have died. 47 of those were definitely murdered by the police or military forces. It was kind of interesting hearing about the reports because one week it was 13 people died and it felt like the next day it was 26, then 30, 47, now 69 people have died It's wild. It's wild. So what was the U.S. response to this? I'm an American, so I have to take responsibility for the BS that my government does all around the world, unfortunately. America was one of the first to recognize President Boluarte. And as an American, anytime America does something, I immediately have to question it. Like, where are you coming from recognizing Dina Boluarte? What are you doing? What are you doing? Did anybody ask you? Somebody probably did ask them, but still. Congress has called on Biden to stop aid to the country of Peru, which is really interesting because when we talk about aid, what exactly are we talking about? According to an article on PBS NewsHour, 20 progressive Democrats wrote a letter to President Biden, which said security forces have indiscriminately responded with almost no regard for protesters' human rights. Rather than working to de-escalate tensions, the Boluarte government has substantially increased tensions, including classifying protesters as terrorists and limiting the citizens' right of movement. In the article, it states that the U.S. provides over $40 million of security assistance. Security assistance. According to the Washington Office of Latin America, that security assistance is aimed at countering Peru's drug trafficking. One of my biggest critiques of U.S. foreign policies is the fact that we supply countries with security assistance, which is basically in the form of weapons and military trainings, and those countries then turn around and use it on their own citizens. America is not in the business of peace. We don't know peace. Never met her. Name one time American foreign policy de-escalated a situation. Drop it in the comments. Drop it in the comments. I want to see it. I want to see it. I mean, there might be like one or two, but truly, in Western media, Pedro Castillo was framed as sort of a leftist, socialist politician that no one ever thought would win the presidential race. But in the end, he defeated Kiki Fujimori, which, to me, makes sense when given the choice between the daughter of the former dictator or the indigenous teacher who led a 2017 strike and promotes campesino politics that are for the betterment of farmers and rural communities. Of course, a slight majority of people chose Castillo. I'm not sure it's fair to say Castillo was ousted because of his socialist politics. I mean, the corruption accusations are not unfounded. Basically, 2 plus 2 equals somebody lying. Peru does have one of the highest corruption rates in South America, so it is kind of, I could see why some people might feel like he's being discriminated against because of his socialist politics and because he's for working class people in rural indigenous communities. Because if everyone's corrupt and the only person that is charged for it is the one indigenous candidate, I mean, yeah. Castillo did make a huge mistake. Even Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said Castillo made a mistake in trying to dissolve Congress and the judicial body. From here in America, the media portrayed it as if it was a rogue, communist, Latin American dictator, which is not really the truth. You know, from my perspective, I believed in Castillo because I told you, me and my friend had a conversation about how it's very rare to see an indigenous person in a leadership position in Peru. And so Castillo being elected seemed like a change of course, especially because Castillo had plans to nationalize Peru's natural gas industry. I think that's a policy that, while some may say it's bad for investors, I think that it's actually great for working class people. In an interview with Ali Vargas, Peruvian journalist reporting from Juliaca, he put it as, in Bolivia, the natural gas is nationalized and the distribution is done by the state at fair prices. Whereas in Peru, it's all privatized. Foreign companies sell it back to the Peruvian people at sky-high inflated prices. If the natural gas industry was nationalized, the government would have more control and be able to give its citizens a better deal. Ali even says that Peruvians who live on the border to Bolivia would rather travel into Bolivia, buy gas, and then return to Peru, rather than buying Peruvian gas. I think those communities are who Castillo had in mind when he wanted to nationalize the gas industry. Some might say that these kinds of socialist policies are bad for the economy. But who is it really bad for? Foreign investors who don't care about the land or the people who depend on it? For example, me being Guyanese American, I wish Guyana would nationalize its oil industry. I guess the hope is that if the government had more control over the oil industry, Guyanese people would have better prices and there would be more consideration for the environment. Instead, oil industries and gas industries all over South America are usually driven by greed and profits. But let me get back to Castillo. So yeah, Castillo is not a perfect president, but a slight majority of Peru said,
I'll do the best I can with what I got. Oh!
He won the election. It was the president that the people voted for. But now, Congress has instilled a president that was not democratically elected. A president who is enforcing curfews, policing people's movement across the country, killing protesters. It's more than just undemocratic at this point. It's a violation of human rights. But the issue seems to be bigger than Pedro Castillo. To me, the issue seems to be about indigenous Peruvians in rural communities feeling left out, forgotten, and even pushed out of the political process. It's about racial discrimination against indigenous people by the white Spanish and even Asian elites. Indigenous communities are fighting back. A riot is the language of the unheard, according to MLK, and it's clear these communities feel unheard. I think oftentimes when we tell stories, we often focus on one character because it's simpler, it's easier. But in this case, and in many stories around the world, there are so many people involved. So I want to take the time to honor some of the people and the protesters who have died in the past few months. Ojo Publico is a Peruvian investigative journalism website. They published an article with some of the names of people who have died in the political unrest. Some of these stories sound like straight up assassinations. For example, 21-year-old Rosalino Flores Valverde. Yeah, I know I don't know Spanish. 21-year-old Rosalino Flores Valverde, a young man from Cusco and a gastronomy student who received more than 30 firearm projectiles in his body. Like him, many of the people were shot in their chest, their head, and their back. Many of the people who were killed are between the ages of 18 and 25. 7 of them, 7, were between the ages of 15 and 17. Marco Antonio Semilan was a 30-year-old doctor shot and killed while helping an injured protester. 4 Haitian nationals have died in the town of Desaguadero, a town along the Bolivian border. Reuters even reported a 17-year-old girl who was a psychology student and an animal shelter volunteer killed during the protests. Her name could not be verified. As a Black American woman, I understand the tragedy of police violence, and I really want to wish peace and healing to the families affected. I created this video so that we as travelers and tourists may understand that this is a very sensitive time for Peruvians, especially those living in rural cities such as Cusco. Let's be sure to be respectful and considerate of the political climate of any country that we visit. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying that 2023 is not the year to visit Peru. I personally would wait until the next election cycle has ended and kind of seeing how that plays out before I would book my ticket. Yes, Machu Picchu has reopened, the airports have reopened, and sure, you'll be able to walk around, but you might experience significant delays and barriers. Also, while the protests have calmed down for now, there's no way of being sure that they won't erupt again while you are visiting Peru. I'm sure a lot of people are most afraid of being targeted by Peruvian protesters. There was one report of tourists being kidnapped by protesters. But that would not be my main concern, simply because I'm a black girl, and typically in my experience, I don't scream money, power, and privilege the way my white American counterparts do. Also, I know how to act, and I try to have a certain level of humility, which I feel like prevents me from being a target. Everything, you could go there and everything could be great, everything could work out, or you could go there and 2 days into your trip, a protest erupts in Lima and you're stuck in the hotel. Or there's a general strike, which many protesters have been calling for a general strike. So, bam, suddenly you can't go to restaurants because all of the restaurant workers have decided to strike. And lastly, there could just be more police presence. There could be more fences around certain cultural sites. There could be barriers to traveling in between different towns. All of this is done in order to prevent protests, but it could have a significant effect on tourists, and you just wouldn't be able to truly enjoy your trip. Bottom line, I would wait to travel to Peru. The next election is planned for 2024, and it might be moved up into 2023. But even after those election results, you still can't be sure how the political climate might be. If you want, I'm happy to do an updated video after the election cycle. Please comment below and let me know if that's something that you're interested in. Overall, if you're interested in visiting Peru, you might want to wait at least a few months, probably a whole year. Because, I mean, real ones know December, January, February, that's the best time to visit Peru. So, it's over. It's a wrap. I mean, if you want to go in the winter, go in the winter. But, like, I would wait. If you're watching this several years in the future, I hope that this gives you a little bit of context into the divide between coastal Peruvians and rural Peruvians. To the Peruvians who live in Peru, I got mad love for you. I wish you peace, love, and solidarity. I think what is happening is fucked up. I just hope that things get better. And to my Peruvians who live in America, I'll see you at the bachateria and the salsa room on Wednesday nights or Thursday. You know how we do. Save a dance for me, papi. Okay, that was a little comedic relief, but no, for real. I'll be seeing y'all. I see you shaking that ass. I've included links to book recommendations, all of my resources, as well as a few organizations that are raising funds for health workers and Peruvians who were affected by the recent mudslides. I'll have those links in the description below. I hope this video was educational and informative. I not only like to talk about travel and international politics here on YouTube, but I also provide diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops for companies and organizations of all kinds. If that's something that you're interested in, please see the email in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way into the end. You certainly did not have to, but it means a lot to me and to the algorithms. Solidarity forever, and goodbye.
Peru, para, Peru, Peru, para. I'm new, even Peru, donde para.